Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Incenses of the Orphic hymns. So in part 1 I looked at the background of how incenses are used in general in religion and in mystery cults, and the theory that the Orphic hymns represent a progression of a nocturnal ritual. So I'm going to be continuing on that theme and exploring the different incenses and how they're used within the hymns. Fogliazza in 2025 explores the use of incenses in the ancient Mediterranean to define sacred space, make the forces of the supernatural tangible, and to strengthen communal cohesion. Fogliazza considers that incense is a privileged means of communing with the divine and argues that the ritual dimension was intertwined with medical practice. People came to the temple to heal, and this is particularly true of places such as the temples of Asclepius, but also with other deities associated with healing, such as Apollon, but could also be true of the mystery cults such as Orphismos, though perhaps more to heal the soul than the body. Erez Yodvat 2021 discusses how neuroscience, cognitive science and psychology can help us to understand the initiatory experience of participants in the mystery cults. The paper also discusses how smell is related to long-term memory and the ability to evoke deep emotional recollections. Erez Yodvat describes the major stages of the initiatory process as katharmos, purification, paradosis, instruction, and epopteia, the core experience of the initiation, and argues that the initiate's physical state following preparations and the various sensory experiences of which incense was a part may have affected the consciousness of the initiates and could explain the extraordinary experiences described by initiates. During the period leading up to initiation into a mystery cult, the candidates had to remain pure, and such ritual purity might involve ensuring no contact with births or deaths, having a restricted diet, avoiding certain foods and drinks, and having ritual baths and cleansing with water, which may have involved nudity in front of others. Some mystery traditions required fasting as part of the purification, and this would have had an effect on body and mind. Erez Yodvat argues that initiations also took place in sanctuaries, which were either located outdoors in forests or mountains, or in sanctuaries far from the city, such as the sanctuary of Apollon at Claros. Initiates would often have to walk long distances, which would lead to exhaustion, and the mystery rites themselves were intense, sometimes lasting several days or all night long. Thus, hunger, sleep deprivation and exhaustion would have a physical and psychological effect on the candidates, which would intensify the sensory experience of the rites. The paradosis or instruction stage included the transmission of sacred knowledge, either by oral transmission or required study of texts. However, Erez Yodvat argues that doctrinal knowledge had a lesser importance than the ritual experience. The experience of the epopteia, the body of the initiatory experience, according to Erez Yodvat, is translated as beholding, and visual stimuli would have played an important part, with sacred objects being revealed and torches providing a play of light and darkness. The author cites Euripides, who described the Bacchic Orphic initiates raising their torches up to the mountain in their initiatory rite. Light is also associated with vision, enlightenment and revelation, as well as the prospect of gaining a better fate in the afterlife. Light can also represent the deity being invoked. Darkness is equally important within the initiation rites, the initiations often taking place at night, and the initiate sometimes blindfolded, which disorientates the initiate and triggers the imagination as well as a sense of fear. Short-term sensory deprivation can also heighten the other senses, such as the experience of sounds, smells and tastes. Sensory deprivation and synesthesia can lead to hallucinations, which could be interpreted as mystical experiences. Emergence from the darkness into light can also produce a powerful experience. Music and dance may also have been used on the Bacchic Orphic rites, with the rhythmic movement and melodies helping to put the initiates in touch with the divine. The author mentions the incenses of the Orphic hymns and comments on Danaway 2010, pointing out psychoactive effects of some of those substances, but discusses how olfactory experiences in themselves are associated with strong emotional and physical reactions, and quotes Burkert that the divine was experienced as an atmosphere of divine fragrance. Erez Yodvat says that certain smells appear to have been specifically associated with the mysteries, such as the smell of torches. This is interesting, as the third of the Orphic hymns, that Haniks, offers torches as the incense, which is something which would not normally be considered an incense. An odour could have a strong impact upon the initiates due to olfactory experiences being stored in the limbic system of the brain, where deep memories are stored. Modern research has shown that smell is associated with long-term memory and the recollection of deep emotional responses. Erez Yodvat also notes that the connection between smell and memory is particularly pertinent in the mysteries, as Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, had a central place in the mysteries, particularly, it may be argued, in the Orphic mysteries. Remembering the experiences, particularly the emotional experiences of the rite, was important, but also remembering instructions for the afterlife, which involved drinking from the well of Mnemosyne rather than the well of Lethe or forgetfulness. The effect of different scents on long-term memory and the emotional responses they evoke could also, once connected emotionally with the deity, enable the initiate to connect very quickly and easily with the deity in future use. Danaway 2020 discusses what he terms incense cults and describes incense as the most primary mode of altering consciousness in the ancient world, particularly when substances are burned in a confined space. He discusses the Orphic mysteries and quotes Euripides that the Orphics go into ecstasy honouring the smoke and use it to achieve a frenzy. He says that the hymns include some highly pungent psychoactive substances which would be more potent in combination. He includes among these frankincense, myrrh, storax, saffron, and every kind of seed, as well as unidentified odoriferous substances. He also discusses the Greek magical papyri containing recipes for psychoactive smokes. He also says that Pythagoras was said to be able to prophesise with frankincense, again suggesting the psychoactive properties of frankincense when used in a confined space. If the Orphic hymns represent a nocturnal mystery rite which begins at sunset and ends at sunrise, as Graf believes, then it is likely to be an intense initiatory experience where incense is used to heighten emotional experience. When you delve into the array of incenses detailed in the Orphic hymns, it becomes clear that they were about more than just a pleasant smell. They were deeply tied to how people communicated with the gods and made rituals work. It is unlikely that incenses were chosen at random, but the quality and associations of each scent mattered and helped connect humans to the different aspects of the divine. The particular scents used may have mirrored the attributes of the gods being called upon and built an environment of transformation. Each incense type functions as a sensory channel, connecting worshippers with the divine and invoking particular deities or types of deities, for example, chthonic, joyful, or regal, embodying their attributes. The rites likely began, as did other mystery rites, with katharmos, purification, and paradosis, instruction. The hymns begin with a poem to Musaeus, which was likely an instruction, part of the paradosis. The first of the hymns proper is to Hecate, which, if Graf's theory is to be followed, would have been recited or sung at the Hecatean at the entrance to the sanctuary before entering the sanctuary itself, and no incense is offered here. Hecate is a goddess of transitions and liminal spaces, a guide and psychopomp. Her hymn is followed by the hymn to Protheria, a goddess associated with both Hecate and Artemis, and who is connected with birth, perhaps representing the rebirth experience of initiation, and calling on her for a safe birth. Thomas Taylor, in his commentary on the Orphic hymns, points out that the sequence of the hymns begins with childhood and ends in death, and so the initiatory experience of the hymns can also be seen as a journey through life, invoking the protection of all the blessed gods, and lastly, a happy and peaceful death, endued with the power of memory and the blessings of initiation. The hymn to Protheria recommends an offering of incense of storax, thought to be the sweet resin of the shrub Styrax officinalis, also known as the snowdrop bush. The 1st century CE Roman writer Pliny the Elder, in his Historia Naturalis, says that storax was one of the ingredients of the royal unguent of the Persian kings. He also says that the incense smoke drives away venomous serpents, and so storax also has a protective quality. Benzoin, also known as gum benjamin, is a resin obtained from several trees of the genus Styrax, and is commonly used as incense for religious purposes in many traditions across the world, and the storax used may have been benzoin. Storax has a sweet balsamic aroma and in descriptions by online suppliers is said to help us to create a sacred, transcendent and calming ambience and can help to form a connection between the earthly and divine realms. Storax is purifying, preserving, uplifting and in the past was associated with kingship and royalty and is recommended in a number of the hymns to the gods, but particularly those associated with sovereignty, such as Zeus, Kronos, Demeter and Ipta. It may be offered to Protheria due to its protective properties at the beginning of the journey. The next hymn, which might be the first hymn on entering the sanctuary after passing through the Hecateon, is to Nyx, goddess of night, and torches are offered to her. This may be due to torches being lit as a dark sanctuary is entered, but also, as Erez Yodvat states, the smell of torches is associated specifically with mystery rites. Erez Yodvat quotes Euripides' The Bacchae, in which the smell of burning torches is compared to Assyrian exotic incense, and perhaps aromatic woods were used to make the torches. Aristophanes also mentions the most mystic whiff of torches in the frogs, indicating that the mystery rites were taking place. Thus, the smell of torches may have evoked a sense of mystery and been a suitable first induction to the mystery rite. The hymn to Nyx is followed by the hymn to Uranus, the heavens, to whom frankincense is offered. Frankincense, in Greek Libanon, is also offered to a number of other deities: Ares, Boreas, Corybus, the Coretes, Dicasina, Dike, Fortune, Helios, who is offered frankincense and manna, Hephaestus, frankincense and manna, Heracles, Hermes, Mnemosyne, the Muses, Notus, Uranus, Tethys, Themis, the Titans, Zephyros, and Zeus the Thunderer, who is offered frankincense and manna. The links between these deities and why frankincense may be recommended as offerings for them is not clear. Pliny the Elder says that frankincense comes from the Sabea region of Arabia, and that the Greeks say that the name of the place signifies a secret mystery. The boswellia tree from which frankincense is tapped is known as the incense tree, and Pliny says that 3,000 families have the right to harvest the resin, and that these people are considered sacred. The people who gather the resin have to remain pure, taking a kind of priestly role, and due to these religious observances and the manner in which frankincense is gathered, its price is enhanced. Virgil, however, mentions Panchaea in Arabia as the country of frankincense. Frankincense also grows in India and may also have been imported from India to Greece and Rome. Pliny emphasises the sacredness and expense of frankincense as an exotic incense, and it is possible that its use near the beginning of the rite and then interspersed throughout the rite may be more important than its connection to the specific deities, though this is just my speculation. Crocus, or saffron, is offered to Aether. Aether is the divine fire or essence of the gods, one of the first cosmogonic substances of creation in Orphic philosophy. Crocus is associated with the Orphic mysteries and the mysteries of Eleusis, the latter of which included a ceremony of crocuses before reaching the destiny of the mystery cult, where saffron-coloured bands were worn by initiates who were said to be descendants of Crocus, a mythological figure who was a young man, a lover of Hermes, who was changed into a saffron flower. Crocus or saffron represents the transformation of the mysteries. It is an earthy, spicy smell, which would likely have provided a contrast to the frankincense burned immediately beforehand, producing a different scentscape which could have jolted the minds of initiates. After this, the next scent is myrrh, which is also offered to the Nephilae, Leto, Nereus and Poseidon, there appearing to be a connection associated with the sea, water and water vapour. Protogonus, or Phanes, is an Orphic deity who is the firstborn from the Orphic egg, a being of light who begins the process of revealing the cosmos. In Orphic cosmology, creation begins to occur when two cosmogonic substances emerge from the unutterable principle. These are the divisible and the indivisible substance. The divisible substance is solid and is called Ge, or earth, whereas the indivisible substance is fluid and is called variously ether, fire, water, air. The two primal forces which also emerge crush the aether into an egg, out of which hatches Phanes. Phanes is thus a manifestation of the fluid, indivisible substance. Poseidon and Nereus are theoi associated with the sea, and the Nephilae are clouds, and thus water vapour. Leto, whilst not being a sea deity, was pursued by Hera in myth from land to land, Hera not allowing her to give birth on any solid land, and eventually gave birth to Apollon and Artemis on the floating island of Delos. Pliny the Elder says of myrrh that it is not esteemed in perfumery, as is frankincense, but is used medicinally as a tonic and to flavour wines. Myrrh was also used in embalming in ancient Egypt, and in Christian myth is associated with sacrifice. Hence myrrh is often associated with death and funerals, but I've not found any indication of funerary use of myrrh in ancient Greece. Aromatics are offered to the Astræos, the stars. Aromatics are any woods, herbs, roots, resins, flowers, etc., which release a pleasant aroma when burned. Unspecified aromatics are offered to Adonis, Athena, the Corellian mother, Dionysos, Triatikyrikos, Eros, the Erinyes, the Moroi, Morpheus, Hera, Hestia, the Horae, Leucothea, Melanoi, the Nereids, the nymphs, Okeanos, Perikonios, Physis, Rhea, Sabazios, and Selene. Again, the connection between these deities, or why they were offered aromatics, is not clear. Powdered frankincense, or a mix of frankincense and manna, Libana manna, is offered to Helios. Powdered frankincense burns differently to the larger grains of resin and produces crackling sparks, which may have had a visual effect evoking the fiery power of the sun, as well as producing a scentscape. Libana manna is also offered to Hephaestus, god of fire and the forge, and to Zephyr, the lightning thrower, all deities with fiery qualities. Various odours, again unspecified, are offered to Pan and also to the mother of the gods, who is often associated with Cybele. These are both wild and earthy deities, connected with the mountains and wild places, as well as ecstatic rites. Various odours does not make clear whether the smells will be pleasant and fragrant, or might include more earthy and animal smells, and one can imagine that hircine or goaty smells and heavy musky smells might be appropriate for Pan and the mountain mother. Incenses are varied across the different hymns, with the scents constantly changing as the hymns progress, aromatics being followed by odoriferous substances, followed by frankincense, followed by storax, etc., creating different scentscapes and constantly changing sensory stimuli. Another incense offered to several deities is manna, which is recommended as the incense to offer to Apollon, Artemis, Eos, the Erinyes mixed with storax, Daemon, Aegea, Nike, Palamon, Silenos, Satyros, and the Bacchae, Thalassa, Lycnitos, Dionysos, and Thanatos. There is some confusion as to what is meant by manna. Sometimes another word, livana manna, is used with livanas, meaning frankincense. Manna is sometimes defined as meaning powder or granules, so livana manna is sometimes translated as powdered frankincense, or it could mean a mixture of frankincense and manna, which is how Thomas Taylor translates it. Manna is also a substance described in the Bible and in the Quran as an edible substance given by God to the Israelites to prevent them from starving when they were wandering in the desert. Manna is described as a fine, flake-like thing, like frost on the ground, and as arriving with the dew during the night. It is described as having the appearance of bdellium, an aromatic resin extracted from commiphora plants. Manna was baked into cakes, with raw manna tasting like wafers that had been made with honey. Manna has been interpreted as a type of natural honey found in the mountains near the desert, as a substance exuded by certain insects, much like the honeydew which aphids exude, or as a sweet syrup derived from specific plants that grew in scattered parts of the wilderness. The fragrant ash, Fraxinus ornus, is also called the flowering ash or ash manna tree. The nymphs of this tree are called meliae. They're called ash nymphs because melia is the word for the ash tree and is derived from meli, which means honey. Manna, therefore, may be the sweet, honey-like gum collected from various trees, such as the fragrant ash or ash manna. The ash tree and its sap is sacred to Zephyr, who as a baby was hidden in a cave and raised by the meliae. Manna resin from the fragrant ash can be purchased and is sometimes used in Middle Eastern cooking to give it a sweet, honey-like flavour. As an incense, it is said by the sellers to attract prosperity, success, good health, and connect with earth and nature, and within the Orphic hymns it is recommended as an offering to Apollon and Artemis, both of whom are connected with wild places and with protection and healing. It is also offered to Asclepius Zeus, Zeus of lightning, who brings life to a sweet end, though to him is offered livana manna, powdered frankincense, or a mix of frankincense and manna. Aegea, goddess of good health, Nike, goddess of victory, Palamon, who protects ships and sailors, Silenus, Satyrus, the Bacchae, all connected with wild places and with joyful revelry, Thalassa, goddess of the sea, and Thanatos, god of peaceful death, are all offered manna. The sweetness of the incense reflects the beneficent nature of the theoi, as well as a connection to nature. Grains, or every kind of seed, are offered to Gaia, which would give a less fragrant and more earthy smell, depending on the grains used. Danaway, 2020, suggests that these may have been employed for a psychoactive effect. He cites Euripides' Hippolytus, which says that the Orphics go into ecstasy honouring the smoke, and that they use the smoke as a means to achieve frenzy. Danaway argues that the Orphic hymns give an array of incenses, which include some pungent and psychoactive substances, which in combination would be more potent. He includes frankincense, myrrh, storax, saffron, every kind of seed, unidentified aromatics, and odoriferous substances among the possible psychoactive substances. A thick aromatic smoke filling the sanctuary would unite the participants in fumes which may have been both fragrant and psychoactive. Danaway suggests that thorn-apple, hemp and henbane seeds were used in the incenses used at Delphi, and that similar could have been used in the offering to Gaia in the Orphic hymns. The inhalation of smoke in a confined space may induce visions due to lack of oxygen, even if the substances are not psychoactive, but a mix of psychoactive substances which act in combination would produce a stronger effect. The employment of different aromatic substances in the Orphic hymns functions as a sensory experience and also as a way of helping divine communication occur, and likely had a number of purposes and effects. By calling on the gods through particular sense, those practising aimed to make a sacred space that would help human experience transcend. Incense has an important function in the hymns in establishing a bond between humans and the divine, an idea still seen in many modern spiritual contexts. Incense would have been part of a complete sensory experience, which created an altered state of consciousness and produced profound spiritual experiences, whether due to psychoactive effects of substances or to the preparations and purification rites the Mysti underwent before the mystery rites, in combination with the powerful sensory experience of the rite itself. The different scents would have become associated emotionally with the different deities, and in any future use would have evoked the feelings experienced within the mystery rite. Incense is frequently used in modern times to help to create sacred environments, deepen meditation practices, and represent purification, much like the ritualistic traditions of the past. Incenses played a key role in communicating with deities, fulfilling various purposes within polytheistic religious systems. Moreover, the emphasis on materiality within ancient magical practices emphasises how particular materials, such as incense, gained spiritual importance. These kinds of historical understandings serve to strengthen the lasting influence of incenses as current spiritual seekers incorporate symbolic meanings from Orphic traditions into their own rituals, thereby linking the past with the present in their spiritual experiences. Incenses are now widely available and are no longer as expensive and rare as in ancient times, such that individual practitioners can purchase the incenses used within the Orphic hymns. And whilst it is unlikely that most practitioners will get to perform a night-long mystery rite with all the incenses, they can use each incense to offer the theoi in shorter rites, calling on one or a few of the theoi. The incenses will become associated in memory with the deities they are offered to, and will increase the effect of prayer and recitation of the hymns, evoking the presence of deity immediately. Although research has been undertaken on the neuropsychological effects of different smells, no research, as far as I'm aware, has examined the specific effects of the different incenses of the hymns on neurological activity or on the emotional responses of those who experienced them, and this would be interesting further research. I hope